Hey fam, I'm gonna say some stuff that's probably going to ruffle some feathers, so I'm giving you fair warning. We're gonna talk today about diagnostic, uh, the diagnostic process and its relation to gender. And you may or may not already be aware of this, but in the field of psychology, it's dominated primarily by females. It's about 75% female led and about 25% male driven in terms of the representation of that profession. When you look at the number of people being given diagnoses, and you break that down by gender, you'll also notice that it is more common, especially in a woman's younger years, like 16 to I think 25. It's more common for a female, like significantly more common for a female to be given a mental health diagnosis than it is for a man in that same age bracket. And the reason I want to mention this is because I think that there could be a misconception in society that these factors are being driven by the patriarchy. But if you look at the research indicates that the majority of people in that practice, the majority of the people giving out these diagnoses are women, and the majority of the people receiving the diagnoses are women. Now, we also know that there is a gender stigma when it comes to seeking mental health treatment. A lot of men do not seek necessary mental health treatment. So it is possible that if men sought treatment more frequently, we might see these numbers adjust to where there wouldn't be such a significant change between the diagnoses of men versus the diagnoses of women. But the reason I wanted to talk about this is I think that it's important to acknowledge that not only is there a predominance of this happening to one specific gender, we also know that the stigma of being given a mental health diagnosis often severely hinders the financial stability, financial well-being, and the earning potential of the person receiving said diagnoses. So I want to talk about this because it is a form of harm, of financial harm, to label someone with some condition, especially considering that many of these conditions cannot be validated with scientific medical tests. I think it's different when you're looking at a brain scan and you can see visible brain damage, whether it be like a TBI or something like that, where you actually have traumatic brain injury and you can see that in a scan. That's a completely different thing than what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is when somebody says something along the lines of, oh, that person has a chemical imbalance in their brain. Okay, that's imbalance. What is balance and how is that determined, and what medical testing can be done to validate that claim? Because if you can't validate that claim, and the claim you're making is only going to financially harm the person you're making it against, how is that helpful? Just something to think about. I know a lot of women struggle with like the gender pay gap and things like that. Well, I just kind of want to throw this out there because I want to make sure we're not self-sabotaging. I'm not trying to suggest that it is a bad idea to get mental health care. I'm not even trying to suggest that. But I think that there is a huge difference between going to see somebody who approaches your conversations from a faith-based perspective and can acknowledge that the treatment protocol does not have to necessarily rely on medication. It does not have to rely on being given some sort of diagnosis that is going to impede your ability to survive in the world financially and so forth. I just think it's important to consider a variety of factors when you're potentially getting that treatment. In my personal opinion, I think you get a whole lot more benefit from meeting with a pastor or meeting, with someone in, that's a nun, someone that you can talk to about spiritual things in your life and also talk about things going on in your life that are a struggle. I find that to be much more useful without the downside. So, I mean, I know everybody's going to have a little bit different take on that, but I just feel like having conversations about struggles, things that I'm dealing with, is much more healing. It's a more healing setting, a more healing modality when I'm talking to somebody that approaches things from a faith-based perspective. They're able to guide me and give me advice that is not only biblically sound, but also doesn't put me into a situation where it's harmful to take that advice, or potentially harmful. So I just think that there are different approaches. Everybody's going to have different approaches to how best to handle mental challenges that they're going through. I just would like to encourage you to maybe consider seeking treatment from your local church as opposed to someone who wants to pump you full of drugs. I hope that you understand where I'm coming from. I'm not meaning this to be, a dig at anybody. I'm not meaning this to hurt anybody's feelings. I am really saying these things out of a place of care and concern because I want the highest and best for everyone that is struggling. And I don't necessarily think that the modes that we're operating under within that profession now are conducive to people's long-term health or their short-term health. Quite often I think that those treatment plans are more harmful in not only the short term but also in the long term. That is corroborated by a lot of the PubMed research that indicates that the relapse rate is higher among individuals that are put on psychiatric medication versus placebo. If you don't believe me, feel free to look it up. I've done my due diligence. I encourage you to do yours. God bless you all.